Hey guys, welcome to Great Learning. Have you ever been in a situation where it feels like working with a programming language is difficult? Maybe because it's either too complex to work with the syntax or it does not offer enough tools to help you as a programmer. Now, talking about tools, Jupyter Notebook is a fantastic tool that is helping hundreds of thousands of developers across the globe. Jupyter is seen as a key element in solving various problems across multiple domains, that involve the usage of languages such as Python, R, Scala, and a lot more. Keeping this in mind, we here at Great Learning have come up with this Jupyter Notebook tutorial to help you understand the concepts completely, and I'm confident that by the end of this tutorial, you will not only be able to work with Jupyter Notebooks, but actively use them in your day-to-day coding tasks as well. Well, are you guys excited? Let's get started.
Before we get started, I want to introduce you to Great Learning Academy. This is a free initiative by Great Learning where you can have access to over 200 plus courses with 1000 plus hours of free content on all of the trending high demand domains absolutely free. Register now to complete the course and get your free certificate of completion as well. Check out the link in the description box of the video below for more details. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, I want to request you to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. This is done to make sure you do not miss out on any of the new updates or video releases from Great Learning. And of course, guys, if you enjoy this video, show us some love and do like this video. Knowledge increases by sharing, right? So make sure you share this video with your friends, colleagues, and everyone who can make use of it. And at the end of it, make sure to comment on the video if you have any queries or any suggestions, and I'll be more than happy to respond to all of your comments.
Alright guys, so to come to the agenda of this Jupyter Notebook tutorial, we are going to start this tutorial out by understanding what is a Jupyter Notebook, right? Now, some of you all who have clicked on this particular tutorial might know what a Jupyter Notebook is, or you might have used it, or you might know that, hey, using a Jupyter Notebook solves so many problems so quick. So you guys are curious to understand what it is or how best you can use it, right? Well, we're going to start the session out by understanding what it is and of course all the key features that we have of Jupyter Notebooks in general, right? Now, after we check out the key features, we are also going to check out who uses Jupyter Notebooks in today's world, right? Now, you might be very curious as a learner to understand about, hey, where is this used? Is it even popular, or do we have a lot of people using them, right? So I'm going to answer that question as well. The answer to it is absolutely fantastic, right? Then I'm going to show you how to install Jupyter Notebooks on your machines, right? It's actually very easy. It can get complex if you do not know the simplest way of how you should install it. So I'm going to guide you with multiple methods, and I'm also going to show all this to you practically as well, right? Now, after we install Jupyter Notebook and we configure that it's working fine, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to have a hands-on session by using a Jupyter Notebook with Python, in fact, right? So let's take up a machine learning model that we had. So in that hands-on demo part, I definitely want to showcase the power of Jupyter Notebooks to you guys. Let's take up a complex data science problem and let's see how simplify. So let's take up a data science problem and let's see how much of a degree to which we can achieve modularity, simplicity, and effectiveness as well, right? So we're going to check that out. Now, after that, we are going to also check out the benefits of using Jupyter Notebooks as well, right? Now, this is put after the demo because when we get to this point, you guys will already be aware of some of the benefits, right? So I want you guys to actively engage with the content as well. So we're going to be discussing the benefits once you understand it theoretically, once you understand it practically, and once you get your thought process going, right? Fantastic, guys. Now, without further ado, the first item on the agenda, let's get started. What is the meaning of a Jupyter Notebook, right? To answer this question, we have to ask another question. What is a notebook, right? To get to a Jupyter Notebook, first of all, you need to understand the context in which we're talking about notebooks, right? A notebook is basically, a book which consists of a lot of information in the real life as well, right? Now, I have multiple notebooks where, each book is maybe for a subject like how it was in the school and colleges. But the notebook that we're talking about here in general, let me tell you about it. Okay, so when we're talking about a notebook, what is it in our context? Well, to be very honest with you, it is nothing but a very simple document that consists of a variety of information, either of the same domain, of a different domain, or something which has a structure associated with it, right? Now, in our case, what we do is in a notebook, we divide a huge piece of Python code into many tiny pieces of code snippets called cells. And in fact, there we go on to not only just program, we can write the code, debug it, modify it, delete something. So you have it's like a playground for all of you all developers, where you have access to a fantastic user interface. You type your Python code and you get started with it in a very simple fashion, right? Now, this is where the most advantageous a notebook has been, is that getting started with Python, when Python started getting really popular, maybe in 2014 or 2015, it was very difficult then, at least in my opinion, for beginners to install Python, get started with it, set the environment variable, do this, do that, have configurations and all of that, right? With the case of a notebook, you're going to be saving yourself all of this effort and still have Python to work along, right? So it's always fun to have one single document that will not only give you the ability to just, run the code as and when you require, but also display output, display error messages, warnings, whatever it is. So it's complete, it's a complete document which consists of everything you need, maybe apart from the actual files, right? Now, in the demo that we are going to do, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take a look at a data set as well. I'm going to be showing you how to import a data set into your Python Jupyter notebook as well. Right now, that's an important concept all of you all should know about. We're going to discuss that. So you should have had some clarity at this moment in time about what a Jupyter notebook is, right? So to talk about Jupyter, you can see that the spelling is different, right? It's not the same spelling that you would associate with the planet Jupiter we have in our solar system. Now, Project Jupyter is actually a fantastic open source program, which again, multiple developers came about, right? If you've heard of this concept called IPython, well, Jupyter Notebook was actually born, out of IPython. So it was basically the inception of Project Jupyter in 2014 from all the developers who used to work on IPython, and of course in that arena and domain as well, right? So it is a very nice tool in a way where it offers you fantastic user interface, a graphical user interface wherein you can have your codes in tiny pieces and snippets, and you can have such levels of modularity, right, which was pretty much impossible before Jupyter, in my opinion. Now, whenever you're taking a look at why Jupyter Notebook is even so popular, or whenever you're taking a look at coding contests, Kaggle, or wherever it is that people are trying to solve problems using programming, there you will always see that, hey, here's a notebook with my solution, right? It's a very common thing to do. You can give everything, you can have headings, you can have explanation to your code, you can have comments, inputs, outputs, data, everything that you require. As I told you, it's called as a notebook because it has all of these things, right? So right from 2014, I remember starting to use Jupyter Notebooks, right? So somewhere around 2015, and then of course Google Colab came into the picture. So you do have some people using Colab and some people using Jupyter Notebook as well. Google Colab is nothing but a Jupyter Notebook. It works very similarly, has a very similar user interface, but it is hosted completely on the Google Cloud platform. So there is zero processing that is required from my end apart from an internet connection to use, in fact, the world's most powerful graphical processing units. In fact, the world's most powerful servers themselves, right? Of course, since it's a free tool, it's an open source tool, it's not like the entire thing is provided to you at Google Colab, but hey, Google is still providing a facility for you to do it for free, right? The advantage with the Jupyter Notebook here is that you can take your code anywhere with you. It's going to be in a single file. It's a completely structured piece of file that you can carry, you can share with friends and all that, right? So it's this kind of interactiveness, right? It's basically a computational notebook which gives you fantastic options to interact with it, write code and execute. I think this is the reason why Jupyter became super popular, right? Now, this was when users and developers were getting started with the tool. But if you really have to talk about how Project Jupyter, became the number one thing, take a look at these two concepts. It's called quick prototyping and exploratory data analysis, or EDA. Let's talk about quick prototyping for a second. Quick prototyping is one of these situations where you have an idea and you want to say, hey, I have this idea, I have this problem, I know the solution. I want to quickly type in a piece of dirty code which may or may not work, or it might be pseudocode or anything like that. And I just want to make sure that I go from thought to product really quick, right? At least the first version of the product. It's also called as a prototype, right? If you're a person who's in this kind of a workflow where you just want your idea to go from its inception all the way to a product really, really quick, then having a Jupyter Notebook is going to help you immensely, right? That's again the number one selling point for Jupyter Notebooks. The second thing is when you're taking a look at exploratory data analysis, usually when you're doing complex analysis, right? Again, as we've been doing on multiple videos here, on the Great Learnings YouTube channel, you can definitely understand one thing about data analysis is that it will ensure that even though things don't get complex syntactically, once you start looking at 100 lines of code all bunched up together, it can be a little confusing. Again, here is where the modularity aspect of Jupyter Notebook, just wins across the board, right? Now, I am just naming the concept and saying that it wins because if you are not accustomed to using Jupyter Notebooks and that first time you use it, it's like being a kid in a candy store, right? That's how happy Jupyter Notebooks really make me, because again, I am not really a fan of command line interfaces where you have to sit and type in there, or I mostly do not use a lot of IDs as well. So if you're on the same train, you definitely will love this, right? So one question I usually get asked all the time is, hey, so okay, if you're talking about a Jupyter Notebook, now this is from the people who do not know what a Jupyter Notebook is. They'll be like, okay, so what does this user interface look like where you can write and put in your Python code and execute it really well, right? Well, the interface is on your screen right now. We are going to check all of this out practically. In fact, this is just a screenshot of the demo that we are going to be taking a look at, right? So for the people who are very much interested, we're going to be taking a look at a complex demo. I'm going to be simplifying it to a super simple level where you will not only understand the demo, you will not only understand a little bit about Python and data science, but the main aim of that demo will ensure to make sure that you guys understand how you work with Jupyter Notebook and how best you can use it for your projects going ahead as well, right? But then taking a look at an interface like this and seeing the Python code there, in my opinion, is definitely better to a lot of the IDs that I've used, and definitely a lot better than the Python command line interface, at least for my preference when I'm in the zone and I'm writing a lot of code, right? Fantastic. So I hope we are clear with the user interface. We are going to walk through all of these things practically. But then before we get to the point, we really have to talk about a lot of stuff and understand it theoretically as well, right? So here's the next thing that you really need to know about Jupyter Notebooks. Jupyter Notebook has its popularity so strong in today's world that it has become the de facto standard whenever people are looking forward to performing research, using the Python programming language, or of course using the other programming languages that are supported by Jupyter Notebook as well, right? This is a super important thing for all of you all to know at this moment of time. Why? Because we're not talking about personal applications. We're not talking about commercial applications. Remember, we're talking about research, the root of everything else, right? I mean, it is a super important part of either creating a product or even thinking about creating a product, right? Research. If this entire process can lean against Jupyter Notebook and Jupyter Notebook can support it completely, there is no tool that is more wonderful than that, is what I believe, right? That is what, again, it's not just my words that I'm saying all of these. When you take a look at researchers, when you take a look at scholars, or when you take a look at hardcore programmers, when you ask them, hey, what's that one tool that's really helped you a lot, maybe with Python or R programming language, the first tool they usually prefer putting out there is straight up saying Jupyter Notebook, right? So this is thousands of developers out there, and I definitely concur with their opinion because as I told you, if it's this good, it definitely requires a spot in the research domain, because there, if you get to work on efficiency, and if you're working on research and you're simplifying your manual tasks, or your own thought process has more room for research, it's always a better thing, right? So that's an important point I wanted all of you all to know as learners. The next thing which I always get asked about whenever I'm giving a seminar about anything related to data science, whenever I'm talking about data science, the first question I always get asked usually is, hey, do you use a Jupyter Notebook as well? Right now, this is from the people who know what a Jupyter Notebook is. Now, for all of you all who might not know, you have to understand that data science is a huge domain, right? It's literally an ocean's worth of a domain. Now, if there is a tool that can help simplify a lot of things for you when you're working with this domain, don't you think that's an advantage? That's the reason, again, why Jupyter Notebook came into the picture. They said, hey, our tool is going to simplify a lot of things for the programmers who are working with data science. And it has become such an integral part of data science today, be it online, whenever you're learning using content, or whenever you're seeing someone actually build an application. I think it's rare people are using IDEs to get there. Most of these solutions or most of these applications can actually build by just using the command line interface, or in fact even using a Jupyter Notebook, right? So for data science, this tool is helping very, very much. And if you guys are data science enthusiasts watching this video right now, and if you have used a Jupyter Notebook, you know exactly what it is that I'm talking about, right? Now, for the people who do not know what I'm talking about, do not worry. At the end of this particular tutorial, I will make sure that all of you all get to take away a good amount of knowledge, a solid understanding of Jupyter Notebooks, right? Look at it. We're just a short way into the tutorial and we've understood many things about Jupyter Notebook, right? Well, there is more. This is a question, ladies and gentlemen, that you see on your screen right now, to which you already should have an answer to, because I actually gave out an answer a little bit before, right? So is Jupyter Notebook a paid tool? Well, the answer to it is absolutely no. Is Jupyter Notebook a paid tool? No. The entirety of how Project Jupyter was even born is by having open source as its main pillar, right? So when anything is open source, it means that there's open contributions from people around the world to develop that particular product. Similarly here as well, Project Jupyter and Jupyter Notebook is, at least Jupyter Notebook is a free tool to use, wherein you can go on to work on it, type in your Python code, execute it fine. So you really do not have to pay anyone, in fact, to use Python as well, and of course to use the Jupyter Notebook as well, right? So it's completely free, be it for personal use or be it for commercial use as well, right? Fantastic. Now we are gonna talk about a little bit of key features of Jupyter Notebook that you guys definitely should think about, and you should always keep in your mind whenever you are thinking about either finding your favorite IDE, or in fact if you're confused between multiple flavors of Jupyter Notebooks that are out there, right? We're going to be talking about the vanilla, the original Jupyter Notebook out there. Well, first of all, let's talk about how Jupyter Notebook even supports this plethora of languages that we have in today's world, right? See, we have so many programming languages in today's world. So for a tool to support most of these or all of these is really impossible. But then when you take a look at Jupyter Notebooks, right? So this notebook, in fact, the entire Project Jupyter supports over 40 programming languages, everything from Python, R programming language, and Scala, right? That's the logo you see on your screen in case you guys haven't worked with big data tools, right? So the third logo you see on your screen is Scala. As I just mentioned, it is super popular for big data. Right, let's take a look at the next feature. Now, the next feature talks about having an interactive user interface, right? It has happened to me, in a decade's worth of programming, where you actually will understand your output better if you have a very clutter-free and a clean-looking user interface to work with. First of all, right? That is exactly what Jupyter Notebooks offer to you. It is not just that you can type in your Python code, have some inputs, give it some data, you have your output, and you're done, right? You're talking about making your own process of writing the code very efficient in a way where maybe you have a lot of time to actually think about solving the problem, or in fact also thinking about the logic actively rather than breaking your head about Python's complex syntax, or maybe you looking at the syntax and getting confused, or if everything looks cluttered to you if you're working with the command line interface, or maybe even an IDE, right? Of course, I'm not saying IDEs are bad. IDEs are absolutely fantastic, but then in this particular situation, I believe that the Jupyter Notebooks have a slight advantage, at least in terms of how well it is presented to you, how simple it is, how modular it is, right? So this is an important feature that all of you all, ladies and gentlemen, should know about. Now, once we understand about its interactive user interface, of course, I'm going to guide you guys practically by showing you all the things, all the options and all of that. But it's not only all these things that we're talking about is what makes Jupyter Notebook super popular. You can write all your code in one place. You can understand the output better. And of course, all the other 100 advantages we just spoke about right now. But the most important thing is that you can really share it easily, right? You might have seen the file extension .pynb, right? .pynb basically stands for Python Notebook, right? It's a notebook file wherein you can have text elements, explanations, code snippets, images, videos, audio. I think you can have literally anything you want there if it helps you solve the problem at hand in any of these domains, right? Most popularly, it's used a lot in data science and competitive programming, right? Fantastic. Now, you have to understand that you can have just this one file, which is maybe like what a small program is 100 kilobytes, 200 kilobytes. It depends on the program itself. So you can, directly upload it to the cloud, share it in an email, put it up on your GitHub in case if it's your program that you have worked on, right? So you can do a lot of different things with Jupyter Notebook. The most important abilities, whenever you're usually using Jupyter to solve a problem, it is a team effort, right? It's not like you're solo doing everything. That is when you might have to write a piece of code, share it with a couple of friends, share it with your testers, share it with another entirely different team or a shareholder, right? That is where, this is just a click of a mouse button, hit save, attach the file, send it in a mail, and even they can open it in their Jupyter notebooks, work on it, change on it, debug something, send it back to you, and you're good. That is a convenience which is very rare in the world of programming, right? I mean, IDEs do this, but Jupyter notebooks do it better in an easier fashion, let's just say. Nice. The next point that we really have to talk about, the important key feature here, ladies and gentlemen, is basically talking about big data integration. See, I believe that the entire world is a big data problem today, right? I mean, we are generating so much data, right? Terabytes and terabytes worth of data got generated by the second I did that, right? By the time you heard the sound, there are multiple thousands of terabytes worth of data that was either being shuffling around the world, that's been moving, or that's being created right now. That's a fun fact, right? So knowing that we're living in a world where we are being surrounded and to a point where, you're almost suffocated by the amount of data that we have, having the ability to actually leverage all of these things using tools from our domains such as big data is something super fantastic, right? Here in the case of Jupyter Notebooks as well, this is exactly what we do in the case of using it with programming languages like Python, using it with programming languages like R or even Scala as we discussed, right? So it's a very important thing. Now, after you understand all of these things about the key features, in fact, even an introduction, knowing what a notebook is, you guys even saw the user interface for a second there, I'm sure you will have this question that says, hey, okay, so who uses Jupyter Notebook, right? So if you were to understand about who else uses Jupyter Notebooks, well, you're in for a treat. Let me tell you this. A Jupyter Notebook is used by millions and millions of people across the globe, right? In today's world, there's somewhere around 700 programming languages, of course, in total today. And some of these programming languages have not just one integrated development environment as in IDE, but multiple IDEs, right? Think about Python itself, ladies and gentlemen. Python can be, you can write Python code on PyCharm, you can write it in Google Colab, you can write it in Jupyter Notebook, you can write it in multiple different places with multiple different user interfaces, which is eventually doing the same thing or solving the problem, but it's offering different amounts of efficiency there, right? So if you're curious about where these millions and millions of people are actually fitting in, I think we have to understand this by first looking at the growth of Jupyter Notebook, right? So I told you it came out in the year 2014 or somewhere around 2015, right? So in fact, in its first year or in 1 or 2 years of its infancy, there were 200,000 users, 200,000 users who started using Notebook in 1 year of Project Jupyter, putting out the notebook. But it's not that. Listen to this. Right from 2015, which was 6 years ago, from then to 2018, right? There was such a huge spike. There was such a huge increase in the number of users that we're talking about. We have 3 million notebooks. In fact, 3 million notebooks were shared in the year 2018. if you're thinking about 2021, I definitely would believe that this number has doubled or tripled in itself. We are talking about it in the millions, and I'm aware of that. Right, that's how popular it is. Everyone, people from Google, Microsoft, IBM, Bloomberg, right? I don't want to name all of these companies, companies, and of course even certain fantastic universities across the globe as well. So wherever you see on the screen, right, understand this: everyone from Google, Microsoft, all the way to NASA make use of Jupyter Notebooks, right? And in the research side of things is where you see a lot of the names of these universities, right? Northwestern, NYU, Berkeley, be it something like Clemson, Michigan State, and all these, right? So research, universities, individuals, startups, and even multinational corporations. The net worth of the companies on the first row itself should sort of, give you an understanding of, hey, if these guys are using Jupyter Notebooks, I think it's fine, right? So that kind of a thought process should help you understand. It's not just the thought process that's going to help you. This is an open source community where, if you're a person who's new into using Jupyter Notebooks, new into using Python, you definitely will be welcomed really, really well in this community with open arms, regardless of your proficiency, of how well you know Jupyter Notebook. You might not even know how to click a button, on Jupyter Notebooks. So there are people who definitely will help you, right? So I definitely want to, welcome all of you all at the end of this tutorial to actually be a part of this community that we have, right? The Jupyter Notebook community across the world. It's not a website, it's not a group or anything like that, but it's a place, whenever you're talking about Jupyter Notebooks, you can find help on millions of websites out there regarding, right? Any websites, be it Stack Overflow, be it Quora, or any of these places where you can ask questions and get answers to them. Well, you will be welcomed with open arms there, right? Fantastic. Now, coming to an important part of this particular session, how do we go about installing a Jupyter Notebook to work with, right? Now, I want all of you all to follow along with me here, right? I'm just going to guide you about what to do, what to download, and how to set it up. Let me actually discuss about it a little bit and we can get started. First of all, to install Jupyter Notebook on your machine, there's an important prerequisite you guys have to concentrate about. Well, even though we've mentioned this, right? There are 700 programming languages, out of which Jupyter supports 40, which is again not a bad thing. But when you're taking a look at the 40 programming languages, let's just say I want to work with something else apart from Python. Now I'm a R programming language guy and I've installed Jupyter Notebook to work with. But a catch here with Jupyter Notebook is that it compulsorily requires at least one kernel to work. When I say kernel, you're going to understand when we're talking about it practically. This is where, right, even though Jupyter supports multiple programming languages out there, Python actually is a compulsory requirement for you guys to go on to work with, right? Either you use Python to install Jupyter Notebook or you use a distribution which provides Python alongside a Jupyter Notebook, right? There's only two options of how you guys can go about this. And of course, there's many ways of how you can install it. The simplest ones are these, but either way, regardless in both the options, you will have the presence of Python, no matter what, right? That's an important thing. Now, the next question you might have might be saying, hey, okay, so if you're installing Python Jupyter Notebook right now, or any Jupyter Notebook for that matter, right? I'll repeat this entire thing. Alright, so now you might have a question saying, are there any ways to install, or is it just only one way that we have to install? I just answered this question previously, right? There's many ways to install, but I'll showcase to you guys two very interesting ways to solve it. Now, one is installation using pip. Pip is basically the Python's package manager, right? Python programming language packaging manager is actually called as pip. And then we have Anaconda. Anaconda is the distribution environment that I was just talking about, right? Now, installing using both is actually possible for all of you all, regardless of your experience with Python. But to install it by using pip, as in the Python's package manager, well, think about it for a second. I told you require Python to install this, right? So if you're installing a Jupyter Notebook using pip, you must already have Python configured and ready to use so that you can use it to install Jupyter Notebook, right? There's multiple commands here. In fact, you have two very important commands that you guys have to use. The first one says install upgrade pip. This is where you're actually installing installing the latest version of the package manager, because if you have an older version of package manager, it might not install Jupyter correctly, right? So make sure you guys are using the latest version of PIP, and once your PIP is updated to the latest one, next you can run a very simple command called pip3 install Jupyter. Now if you guys are working with any other Python version apart from Python 3, right, so you can just use pip install Jupyter there as well. Pip3 install Jupyter is a very simple command, and I think it's very easy to remember as well, right? Pip install Jupyter. Jupyter again, it is Jupyter as you've been seeing, right? So it's two commands. If you guys have worked with Python, this is a breeze to install. Now let's talk about a situation where you might not have worked with Python and you might require some help to do it hands-on, right? So this is where we will go on to use Anaconda. Now let's go on to talk about how we'll use Anaconda for this. Alright guys, so the first thing that we have to do is we have to make sure that we go to Google and we ensure that we have Anaconda, right? I'm going to showcase the steps for you guys. It's very simple. Whenever you're searching in Google, just type for Anaconda. As soon as you type and search for Anaconda, as you can see on your screen, the first thing you will come up with is the distribution themselves, right? Now, I'll walk you through Anaconda's site as well, but there is a very simple way of how you guys can navigate around it, right? Now, it's the first time that you guys are seeing Anaconda. You have to understand that this is a paid product, right? So they have multiple versions and it's a paid product. But at this moment of time, remember I told you that Jupyter Notebooks are free to use. You're just using Anaconda's distribution to install Jupyter Notebook, right? So that is where, I'll just come back to Google here. I'm searching Anaconda here, and you can see this thing called individual edition, right? Anaconda individual edition, or you're going to use this URL as well, anaconda.com/products/individual. This is the toolkit that you guys want to install, right? Now, this is the toolkit which again comes with all of the, so this is what I'm talking about, right? If you're working with respect to machine learning, you'll have libraries such as NumPy, SciPy, Pandas, Scikit-learn, again, a fantastic machine learning library. So you have an access, an uninterrupted access, I want to say, for a lot of these different things, right? Even the deep learning tools such as TensorFlow and PyTorch as well. Now, the thing that you really have to do here is simple, guys. Just click on the download button here, and it's going to ask you, and it's going to take you down to the version that you guys have to install. Now, we were going to talk about this, but now that here we can actually finish the discussion. As you can see on your screen right now, Anaconda is available for all of you all who use Windows. For, of course, all the Apple fans, it's available on Mac OS as well. And for all of you all who are using Ubuntu or any other flavor of Linux as well, well, good news. You guys can have access to Anaconda as well, right? Now, I'm using a Windows machine, as you can see. So I definitely want to download the 64-bit graphical user interface, right? It's basically giving me a setup to do it. Let me go to the, let me actually show you. So as you can see, it started downloading, right? I just actually want to cancel this. You just saw that it was 500 megabytes and it took 3 seconds to download 500 megabytes, right? I have a very fast internet connection, but I didn't want to download it again because I already have it. Now, alright guys, so I've already installed Jupyter Notebook, but then I'm running it through with you guys again, right? So you'll be welcomed with a screen such as this as soon as you download the tool. All you have to do is click on next, click on agree, because you have to agree with the license agreement. And here, depending on either you're working with your machine, your office machine, which might require an admin privilege, right? You can select all users, but as soon as you click on all users, it's going to ask you for the administrator right? Now, as soon as I go on to click and give it the admin right, it basically is going to take you to a next screen where it's just going to hit install and you are done with installation, right? This is literally as simple as it. I'm quitting it right now because I already have it, right? Now, in fact, what were the steps that we just did? Can you guys take a second to go on to just think about the steps that we did, right? Let me open up the steps quickly. First of all, we are going to begin this by installing which edition of Anaconda? The individual edition, right? It's somewhere around 500 megabytes at the moment of creation of this particular video. Download it. It's a very easy to install setup, and as soon as you finish your setup, I'm going to show you where to go about, right? It's literally as easy as opening your start menu and just starting out with your Anaconda or even your Jupyter Notebook, right? As we discussed, the individual edition, of course, Jupyter Notebooks in general support multiple operating systems here, be it Windows, be it Mac OS, or be it Linux as well, right? right? Now here it says, welcome to Jupyter. This is the Jupyter dashboard. Well, enough of screenshots. Let us actually get started to use this, right? Now, let me just click on my desktop. I'll click on start, and on the start, can you see these two things that have popped up here? Jupyter Notebook, Anaconda, PowerShell prompt, and all of that. The first thing that I want to do here is open Anaconda PowerShell for all of you all, right? All right. So I just clicked on the Anaconda PowerShell prompt. In case if you don't have access to this, just click on start and type Anaconda, right? And as soon as I typed Anaconda, you'll get Spider, you'll get Navigator, you'll get prompt, and you'll get a lot of other things, including a Jupyter Notebook as well, right? This is one way of opening the Jupyter Notebook. Now, what do you think is the command to open a Jupyter Notebook from the PowerShell, right? It's simple. All you have to type is Jupyter Notebook. And hang on, there's a small typo here. You have to be very careful, of course. These are all commands, right? So Jupyter Notebook, hit enter, and guess what? It should start out with our notebook in just a second here, right? Now, it's an important thing for you to understand that, hey, do I have to use PowerShell to go on to do it always, right? Okay, guys, as you can see, it took a couple of seconds, I think around half a minute to actually open from the PowerShell to open up this particular page. And this is your first look at a Jupyter Notebook, right? In fact, this is not a notebook. This is a Jupyter dashboard, as we would call it in the notebook, right? Now we opened it up using one way, right? I mean, it's a very simple thing that we did where we went to the command line, the PowerShell, and we opened it. Let's try the other way of opening. But then before that, I want to make sure I want to close Anaconda completely. And after that, I'll just go to Jupyter Notebook and hit enter. So all that is doing is the same thing which I did manually. It's going to open up a prompt. It's going to open up a Jupyter Notebook command, and here it should say, hey, welcome to Jupyter. Right? This is the super amount of convenience. And in the background, if you see, you will have this notebook which will be open, right, ladies and gentlemen? This, make sure you guys are not closing, because if you close this, this entire concept of Jupyter Lab or having access to connect with our kernel itself, right? We're using Windows and all the processing power of my machine to solve all the Python applications there. I'm not connected to the Google Cloud Platform, or let's just say AWS right now. This is where you need a connect from Windows to your Jupyter Notebook. For that, you really have to have this open. If you close this, your Jupyter Notebook will cease to work, right? It'll basically log out of the kernel, and it'll have no access to run the code for you. So let me minimize this. Now that we have actually installed the Jupyter Notebook, the first thing we have to do is let's just try out if it works fine or not, right? Here on the right, let me zoom in a little so that you guys can see what's going on. Of course, you'll see the Jupyter logo there. You're going to see the Jupyter dashboard that looks like this, where you'll have files, running clusters, and all of that. So let's quickly talk about everything from the top. Quit basically closes Jupyter Notebook, right? It closes. This is basically a server client architecture where your Windows machine acts as a server and you using the notebook becomes a client there, right? So quitting this will ensure that it removes the link with the server, and of course logging out will ensure that you log out of the servers themselves, right? Servers as in the servers that in fact we ourselves just created, right? What's running here. Now, what you see here is basically a snapshot of my folder, right? If you go to C drive users, and in my case, if I go to C drive users Anirudh Rao, this is exactly what I will see there, right? It's just giving me a dashboard. You can change this. This can point to C drive, D drive, E drive on default if you want. But since it was just installed and it really isn't configured, it shows you this way. It'll show you when the file was last modified, the size of the file as well. It's not showing the size of the file because we're talking about folders here, right? Now, in fact, we're going to discuss about all of these things. Let me click on new, the button on the right. You guys see it here, right? Let me click on new, and it's saying, hey, what notebook do you want to open? Here, if I had installed R programming language in Scala, it would give me three options to say, hey, you can either open a notebook in Python, basically using the Python's kernel. So guys, from the home page, we clicked on new, we clicked on Python 3, and here we are at our first Jupyter notebook, right? Now, we're going to walk through what happens entirely. But the first thing that I want to try is to see if Python is working or not. Now, what is the standard way to check if Python is working or not? Right? We either type in a message, we type, you can just do whatever you want, a simple Python code to see if it runs, and let's check. Print, welcome to Great Learning. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Great Learning. We have installed a Jupyter Notebook with probably 2 or 3 clicks of a mouse button in a very simple fashion, right? Now, to get to the demo, I have to make sure that you guys understand the interface that we are working with, right? First of all, I hope all of you all are clear with the home page. On the files side, basically it's showing you all the documents. For example, if I click on desktop here, it will basically show you if you have any Jupyter Notebook files. You remember when I told you about a Jupyter Notebook file having the extension IPYNB, or the .py file is basically a Python file? You can see that we have something here on my desktop. It's called as Jupyter Demo, and it's a notebook that I created for all of you all, right? Fantastic. We're going to check that out. As you can see, it'll give you the file size here as well. Let me come to the next tab here. The next tab talks about the current running Jupyter process. Since this is a server client architecture, right now there is no other Jupyter terminal that are running, right? We're not working with any of the terminals directly, but we have a notebook that is open, untitled.ipynb, right? So I can shut this down, I can close this. So I can do, when I say shutting it down, we're talking about kernels a lot. So let me quickly give you an idea about a kernel. A kernel is basically used to ensure that the computer itself, in its most, the CPU understands how to execute Python and ensure that Jupyter Notebook also gets it, right? So that is where we require a kernel to actually sit and work with the phone. In fact, all of your mobile phones, right? Since it's working on Android, or in fact even on iOS, it will have its own kernels as well. It can be a single kernel architecture or multi-kernel architecture. That's an entirely different thing. Next, we have clusters. Clusters is basically when you're using IPython and you're using it in the parallel mode. That is again not the item of the agenda, so we are not going to cover that, but it's fine. For you guys to get to a very advanced level is when you will be using clusters. But for you guys beginners, if I try to cover clusters and show you a demo on that, there's a good chance you guys might get confused on it, right? Okay, now we are done with this particular thing. We realize that, hey, Jupyter Notebook is working and all of that, right? So let's actually go on to take a look at the demo here. First of all, let's take a look at everything here from the tabs and the options that we have. Take a look at the file option. Here you can create a new notebook. As I told you, if you had R language installed as well, you'll get an option to either choose the Python kernel or another kernel itself, and then you can actually open up a Python notebook, as I told you, using the dashboard. Then you can make a copy of it and you can actually save it as untitled copy. Just clicking on it will save the entire notebook into one. You can select save as. Save as is basically you can give a notebook directory / desktop. Maybe I just want the notebook to be called as Anirudh, right? You can do that, and then you can rename the notebook. You can save and checkpoint. So this is a fantastic feature we have to talk about. Checkpoints. Checkpoints is when you actually work on something and you have that as a safe zone in case of something in the future. If you're working on the same code, if you mess something up and you forgot what you changed, where you changed among a lot of lines of code, you can actually revert back to a checkpoint, and all the code which was present at that time, right, it's going to be as it is. And right, even though you've been working and modifying it 100 times, as soon as you roll back to that checkpoint, all of your code at that moment when you saved that checkpoint is going to be intact, and that will be the version that you're going to see, right? Revert to checkpoint is exactly that. Now we don't have any more checkpoints because we just created this notebook, right? You can print it and you can download it as well. Look at this. This is where another huge advantages of Jupyter Notebook lies. So as soon as you click on download as, it will give you multiple different options. You can download it as HTML, download it as JSON. In fact, it uses JSON a lot to work, right? So you require this, you require JSON, to be very honest with you, since we're talking about not just program level or programming language level independency, but we're also talking about operating system independency with Jupyter Notebook, right? So that's where it's important. Next is close and halt. As soon as I click on this, it's going to halt the server and it's going to close the Jupyter Notebook, right? Then coming to edit. Edit is when it's giving you options which you might have not seen in Python before. Cut cells, copy cell, delete cell, split cell. What is all of these options, right? In fact, what you see on your screen right now, ladies and gentlemen, is a cell. In fact, let me delete the cell. Fine, now we have one cell. This is actually a code cell. There's multiple types of cells that you can have, right? For example, let's take a look at something called as a markdown cell. So if it's a markdown cell, it's basically an explanation, or you can use HTML here directly. You can use an HTML tag directly here to either have a heading, subheading, add your images, add your videos, or whatever it is, right? Also, you can similarly just use a hashtag. Hashtag will give you access to multi-levels of heading here. For example, this would be heading 1, right? heading 1. You can see that it's pretty big in the size. Now if I just do it again, this is heading 2, right? I'll do it again, but with this time with 3 hashtags, and now it's heading 3. I guess you guys are understanding where this is going, right? Now for all of you all who might be confusing, hey, isn't hashtags used for adding comments in Python? They are, but right now this cell is not being treated as a programming cell, but this cell is being treated as a text cell where you can put any text that you want, either in HTML format or even in rich text, is exactly what we did as well, right? So these are like the multiple sizes and levels of headings that you guys can get whenever you're working with it. It doesn't have to be heading, right? So you can just type anything you want. For example, step number 1, we are going to use Jupyter, right? So we can have something such as this. This will not run. Even if you click on run, nothing will happen. It'll just come as a text there, right? Because this is a text box. This is not a code box. Next, we're going to take a look at a code box. Basically, the same example that we did right here. Let's just say hello world. And here you can see that there's a slight difference. Here it doesn't say markdown anymore. I can have it as a markdown as well, right? Now, as soon as I hit run, this is a text, but I want it as a code. So all I'll do is click on code, and now I have it in the code snippet, right? Being here is very simple. Now to execute this, what do you do? It's simple. There's a very big play button or a run button that you see. You click on that, it works. But is there any other way? Are there any other shortcuts? Well, I'm glad I asked the same question, because if you take a look at it, it has a ton of shortcuts, right? Instead of actually, hitting the run button every time, all you can do is hit Control Enter, right? If you just click on that tab and hit Control Enter, you'll actually go on to run it and execute it fine as well. But there are 2 color modes which you guys have to pay really good attention to. Is this one? Look, the bar on the left side, can you see it is blue right now? It is telling that we are in an execution mode, or we are in a mode where we can either modify the cell. So this is cell operation, either execute the cell, delete the cell, or move it around top to bottom. But what if I have to go into the mode where I have to code it, right? Let me just click on it. One mouse click on the text bar, and you see the entire thing became green right now. Let me zoom in so all of you all can see. Can you see that the entire thing is now green on the left side? This is when we have gone on to edit mode, right? This is edit mode in a way where you can actually write Python code and it will execute. Now, what if I add a couple more of exclamation marks, hit enter, and hello world is there, right? You saw this. This is how you can move it. No, I'll repeat that. So this is how you can work with a single cell in the edit mode, and of course in the view mode as well. But the other thing that you really have to know is, let me have here another cell for you guys, right? First of all, what we can actually go on to do is find out the version of Python that we have installed, right? We installed Python, we verified that it's working fine, but we actually left it at that. Can we go on to verify and check the Python version that's installed for us, right? On the right, it's telling us that it's Python 3, but hey, Python 3 point what? There's multiple versions there, right? So let us go on to check that out. So guys, I'm going to type in the piece of code now, right? So from platform, import Python underscore version, right? Now this is a function that I'm actually calling that's present in platform for us. So I need to call the function. So I'll just say Python underscore version here. And since this is a function, of course, the parenthesis is important. Now I showed you guys a shortcut. I just hit Control and enter, and you can see on the screen that it's giving me saying, hey, you have Python 3.8.8 installed, right? Pretty simple. Of course, you can find that out here as well. You can find out a lot about, especially this help section is fantastic, guys. You can get a tour of the entire user interface, all the keyboard shortcuts that you need. Right now, for example, I can actually go on to delete this entire cell, not by pressing a delete button, not by going around somewhere selecting options. I just double click on D, but then I do not have to be on the edit mode. Right now, see, it went green. This is the edit mode. If I type D's, it is going to show me D's on the screen there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure I'm not in the edit mode. That's when it's blue color, right? Now that it's blue color, if I double press D, I don't single press it. If I single press it, nothing happens. The key D, I double press it and boom, it deletes it, right? That's pretty simple. In fact, even to add cells, right, you particularly have the examples as well. If I press A, it will add it above the current cell that I have, and if I select the cell and type in B, it will basically add it below. So with the cell that you have selected, if you press A, it's going to add one more cell on the top as in above, or if you select B as in below, it's going to add one more cell below to you guys, right? Now this is when I pressed A, this is going to be a comment, so it's okay. I pressed A and this cell is above, right? And I pressed B and this cell is below, right? This is a pretty simple example. You can see that I'm not taking very complex programming examples here for you guys to understand, right? But then this is a simple Jupyter Notebook interface where you can work with it. You can save files, you can add a cell, basically cut cell. You can even cut and paste cells as if there were files, right? You can move it around with the arrow keys. For example, if I'm moving this around, I can do it as well. Run, stop, rerun, or this last button is actually fantastic. You can restart the entire kernel and run every single piece of code that you have from the first to the last, right? That's an important thing. And then it says that this is a trusted notebook. If it says the notebook is not trusted, or if it's from an untrusted source, you'll have to trust it first. Only then will the kernel connect to run, right? Again, multiple options in the view. It's very simple. You guys, toggle header is basically either removing that Jupyter Notebook untitled, right? Instead of it saying untitled, let me just say Great Learning demo on Jupyter, right? Jupyter. Fantastic. Now I renamed it, right? Rename it. I'll click on save and this notebook is saved. So if I have to remove that particular header, I can just click on view and toggle header. Toolbar is the same thing, right? You either want the toolbar here or you don't. You can select it. You can have code line numbers as well, right? You can see that it says line number 1. Now it will say line number 2, line number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Can you see that? I can either have this on or have this off, right? There's a keyboard shortcut for it. It says Shift L, right? Let me just try Shift L right now. And hey, line numbers work. Now I'm a person who prefers line numbers on, so I'll just leave it as is, right? Fantastic. Now, what's the next option that we are going to look at? Sorry, I clicked on that. Yes, right. So we ran all the cells. You can select a cell and run all the cells above it, or you can select cells and you can run everything below that. You can run all the options. You can manually select the cells to run and all of that, right? So you can convert this from a cell type from a code to a markdown, right? As soon as I converted it to a markdown, it basically went into being a big in blue, right? Again, let me make this code. It's a comment. Again, it won't matter. But then you have to see the difference. This is a Python comment, while this is not a Python comment, this is a markdown, right? Even though I've just used the same hashtag there, that's something you have to know. And then talking about the kernel, yeah, this is when you interrupt the kernel with a double pressing I. You can restart the kernel, double pressing 0. You can restart and clear it, shut it down, change the kernel in case here you're writing a piece of code that's working in Python. Maybe the next notebook you're working on is R and you just want a quick switch. All you do is click here, come and click on R and you're done, right? The next thing is something called as the widget states with respect to Python or with respect to Jupyter in general, right? So Jupyter widgets are super popular, but I want to make sure that you guys do not get confused with using widgets right now. If you're very much curious, let's definitely have a session where we're going to create widgets, save it, start using widgets on it as well. But then if you guys are beginners, it will confuse you out, right? Fantastic. Now we already saw the keyboard shortcuts. You can edit it, you can have your own shortcuts, you can get help with respect to Python, IPython, NumPy, SciPy, right? I really just basically open up their own website. I just clicked on Matplotlib, so it's opened a Matplotlib website there, right? It's pretty simple. But then did you guys notice one important thing when the Jupyter notebook opened up? Look at let me zoom out, right? Look at the URL, the uniform the URL here, right? It doesn't say jupyternotebook.com, it doesn't say any website's name, it doesn't say Google, it doesn't say Facebook. It says localhost 8888/tree. Now what does localhost with the port number 48, right? So it's basically talking about this machine itself. We are in a server client architecture right now. In fact, if you're in a network, you can have your office server actually run your Jupyter notebooks for you, and you can have individual clients connect to the same server and work with it as well, right? Since the server and the client in my case are both on the same machine, it is basically opening up the local host. This would be the address of that particular IP address or network, wherein if you are in an actual server client architecture where the server and the client are two different computers, right? That is when you'll see something else. But right now what you're seeing is basically self-addressing, that is localhost port 48, right? Fantastic. Okay. Now that we've covered all of that, now that we've understood what each of these options does, don't you think it's high time we open up a pretty complex Jupyter notebook to see if we can make use of the modularity to talk about the advantages and all of that? Well, what are we waiting for? Let's get started. Let me click on file. Let me click on open. And now basically it just gives me a dashboard, right? I can actually close this. In fact, I can just close it like this. It's going to have an instance running, which eventually we can close later. Now, where is my file? It's in the desktop. I'll go to desktop. I'll click on jupyterdemo.ipynb. As soon as I click on it, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my Jupyter notebook. It's a very simple data science demo I have for you guys here, right? If I just go to 100% this thing, the font, it'll be very difficult for all of you all to see it, right? Look, it just looks so tiny. I understand that a lot of you all, who tune in from your mobile phones might have a bit of a difficulty to take a look at it, right? So that's the reason why I'm going to zoom in when I'm explaining, right? Now, I can see that all my previous outputs are seen, right? So I just want to remove all the outputs. So I just go to all outputs in the option cell. I go to cell, I go to all outputs, and I say clear all outputs. Now you cannot see any of the outputs, right? Fantastic. Okay, so what is the first thing we need to do? We need to trust the notebook on the top right. If it's not trusted, in this case, it's my own notebook. Of course, it's trusted. So we can actually go on to start executing this, right? This is where I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it's super simple to work with. First of all, what is it? What are we doing here? Let me give you an overview of what it is that we are trying to achieve in this particular demo quickly, right? This is a data science demo, basically where we are using machine learning and a lot of statistics to understand what are some of the features or what are some of the situations and trackable metrics that will cause diabetes, right? So I'm going to have a machine learning algorithm, see if it can perform predictions by using a lot of patient data, and can it tell me if this person is diabetic or not? Of course, in the real world, we will know, right? So me as a programmer, I will know if person A has diabetes or not, but my machine learning model will not know it. So it has to guess. It has to sit and use data, understand it, work on correlation, use machine learning algorithm to see if it can understand it. I know that person has diabetes, yes or no, I know it, but the machine has to tell me, hey, I think I have such and such percentage of probability that this person might have diabetes. You will understand more as in when we go on, right? To go on to achieve this model, we require a lot of data science libraries, of course, like NumPy. NumPy is fantastic. It's called numerical Python. It's absolutely necessary for handling any sort of numerical operations in Python. Then we have Pandas, which offers two beautiful data structures for us. One is called as the series. The second one is called as the data frame structures, right? Fantastic. Next, we have Matplotlib, Seaborn. Matplotlib and Seaborn are two data visualization libraries where in case if we are working on graphs or we're working on any sort of visualization, this is the library you're going to require. Now, why do I have it here? Because I have graphs for you guys to show, right? And the next we have is sklearn. Sklearn, or is also called as scikit-learn, is the heart of the entire machine learning library, is what I would like to say for Python, right? Now we understood the first what's happening here, right? Of course, you can see that from these libraries, I'm basically trying to import a lot of different things. Now, we are not in the edit mode. The green one is the edit mode. The blue one is the working mode. So I just hit Control Enter and it's showing a star here, right? So if it's showing a star, it means that it is still executing. Please wait. Once the star becomes a number, that is when your code segment has executed, right? For example, at this moment of time, this code segment, all we're trying to do is we're trying to import all of these libraries, so it should take a second. Well, there you go, right? It went from a star, it went from the asterisk to 1. If I execute it again, what will happen? Well, 1 will just become 2. 2 will just become 3, 3 will just become 4 if I keep doing it, right? So all I'm trying to do is give it an attachment, give it a number where it's I'm just finding out the order or the number of times I've executed, right? Now the next thing that we're going to go do is actually use pandas to import this data set for us. Now this data set lies here, right? I have to give the path for the data sets in C drive users Anirudh Rao, that's my name, downloads and diabetes.csv. This is a file that I want to use. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hit control enter, right? As soon as I hit control enter, you can see that it shows 5. It shows 5 basically because here it's 4. We did it 4 times, right? Now the data set is imported and it's ready for us to look at. So what is this data set that we are talking about, right? So look at this. As soon as we use the .head method, we can look at the data set. Now, whenever you're thinking about diabetes, ladies and gentlemen, there's many causes that can lead to diabetes, right? Everything from pregnancies, glucose, of course, blood pressure, skin thickness, insulin, body mass index, all of these things, and of course, even age can have an impact on diabetes, right? So wherever you see zeros here, it means that this patient does not have diabetes. Wherever you see 1, it means that this person has the diabetes. This last column, the outcome column, we will see it, but when we are providing it to the machine learning algorithm, we will not provide it unless we are testing it, all right? Okay, fantastic. Now, what we're going to do the next thing is we're actually going to try to print all the columns that we have. As you can see, pregnancies, glucose level, blood pressure, skin thickness, insulin, and BMI and all that, right? A BMI of 25, I think, is considered as the standard to say you're fit. Anything more than that is usually considered as fat, and then it's obesity and slightly obese, completely obese. For example, a body mass index of 43 means that this person is extremely obese. You can see a lot of insulin value in there. You can see their age. I wish this also had their weight as well, right? Because as soon as I look at that body mass index, I can sort of guess that this person might not be getting in a lot of workouts or might not be burning the calories. So there's a good chance he or she might have diabetes, right? So this I can guess. Now I'm going to use my machine learning algorithm to use all of these features to actually go on to give us a prediction there. And these are all the columns, right? I'm just printing it out to give you details about it as well. The next thing that I did here with data.info was to tell you that, hey, guys, listen, we have 768 patients worth of data where we're actually going to do this, right? Fantastic. Now, you know how many people we have? 768, right? The next thing is basically a statistical description of what is going on. It says statistical. It's actually statistical. I'm sorry about that. Okay. So with the statistical description here, you can go on to see that you can find details about the count, as in how many rows of data are there for these particular columns. What is the mean of each of them? What is the standard deviation, the minimum value, 25th, 50th and 75th percentile, and the maximum value as well. So if you just wanted a quick statistical look at the data set, all you had to do is just click data.describe. Of course, data being where our data frame is there, right? So the next thing that you go on to do after just taking a look at it and understanding, right? Now, you might ask me a question saying, why did you do this? Well, I just wanted to take a look at the average body mass index of the 768 people I have here. Well, I can get that with 1 second. I just looked at it and I got the answer, right? So it's 31.9. This is for 768 people all in total body mass index. So the next thing I want to do is I want to see if I have data for all the 768 people. If any of these were to be true, it's telling me that, hey, there is not a number. There is something else apart from a number in these particular rows or columns of data, and please fix it. Since all of it says false, basically my data set is pre-cleaned and ready to use, right? So the next thing that we're going to take a look at is correlation. Let me actually execute this. This will give you a fantastic looking output, as I just told you, right? Let me go on to go a little zoom out on this, and ladies and gentlemen, look at this. This is basically what we call as a heat map or a correlation map, right? Now, this is a very important map, even though it just looks a little funky for the people who might not know data science. Even though it just looks like a lot of pixelated color blocks, it is actually giving me a ton of information, right? I would rather use this to get the information rather than looking at something like this, right? Of course, this is basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to map a relationship, a correlation, a positive or a negative correlation between two of these features that we have here, right? For example, is blood pressure related to glucose? If you ask a question, take a look at glucose, take a look at blood pressure here. It's this. So it's slightly darker color of purple. It's telling me that there is not much correlation. Find a light color. Hey, here's a light color, right? But it's between skin thickness and insulin, or in fact, insulin and skin thickness. These are mirror images basically, right? So it's slightly pink because it's telling me that, hey, these two features have more in common than the other, right? Of course, these are all in-depth data science concepts. Do not worry if you don't understand this. But one last thing about a correlation matrix is that whenever you try to compare the same thing, it will give you 100% similarity, right? That's why all these elements on the diagonal are white. White means 100% positive correlation. Of course, if you're comparing pregnancies with pregnancies itself, there is no difference. If you're comparing glucose with glucose, no difference, right? That's the reason why all of these are white. Fantastic, right? Now let's not get into too much of the detail. Let's quickly get to understand how many people have no diabetes out of 768 people. Well, 500 people don't have diabetes. That means 268 people have diabetes, right? So we know how many people don't have diabetes and how many people have diabetes. Let's quickly plot a graph to showcase. This is where we require libraries like Seaborn and Matplotlib as well, right? Look at this. You can see that if it says 0, if the outcome is 0, it means the person does not have diabetes. So we have 500 people with no diabetes, but 268 people with diabetes. Now, the next thing what we usually do in machine learning is we split the data into testing data set and a training data set. It's just like you guys in your college are giving an examination, right? So you use the textbook to learn and eventually you give out the answer paper after the examination to the teacher, right? So that's when they use your answer paper to evaluate your performance based on your learning from the textbook, right? So here our textbook is basically the training data, and the examination, the test we're going to perform on it is basically called as the testing data. So you have to split the data set so that when you're providing the test data, it sees an entirely new data which it has never seen before. That way it can predict accurately, right? Simple. So all I'm trying to do is I'm splitting the data 80% for training, 20% for testing, and as soon as I click that, it's done. The next thing is where we actually use linear regression. Now, for all the people who might have never used machine learning, who might have never used data science, if you were wondering saying, hey, this guy is showing us a machine learning demo, it might be a really long demo with probably hundreds of lines of code. Not really. All these 3 lines of code is exactly what is necessary to perform the entire machine learning procedure. This is when I'm calling the machine learning algorithm. Basically what we're trying to do is logistic regression. Logistic regression is a supervised form of learning for all the people who might know it. And then we perform model fitting. This is the exact step. This line of code teaches the model how to predict. The next thing is where I try to see if the model has understood anything or not. Let me hit Control Enter. It'll actually give me a warning where it says total number of iterations limited, as in it's just said that, hey, you can increase the number of iterations, and we have basically reached a limit where it's trained so many times already, right? It didn't even show us anything that it's training and it's already trained. Of course, the next step is to perform predictions. I click on it bypassing the testing data, right? Now at this moment of time, I actually know what's going on with respect to my model. If I print something called as a confusion matrix, now for all the people who do not know, these 4 really funny looking numbers will give me everything I need to know about my model. If someone just gives me these 4 numbers about their machine learning model, tells me the problem statement, tells me, hey, these were the use cases and this is what we have done, I can tell you if your model is performing really well or not. In fact, you just give me 4 numbers, I'll tell you if your model is probably doing great or where it might require some help as well, right? So this is a metric which tracks values in terms of what actual values are versus what the predicted values are, right? So it's a comparison where we're attaching a metric called as true positive, true negative, false positive, and false negative. So each of these numbers have a meaning. Now I do not want to get into the detail of it because it might confuse you, right? Now the last step is to find out the accuracy. Now my machine learning model is trained, but how accurate is it, right? As soon as I click on Control Enter, it's telling me that, hey, out of every 100 patients, for 75 patients, it can guess exactly right, saying this person has diabetes or this person does not have diabetes, right? So it's a 75% accurate model in my books, this definitely works, right? Because all we're trying to do is we haven't even shown if the person has diabetes or not to the machine learning model, but machine learning was intelligent enough to understand, saying, hey, okay, so all of these things, I see a common pattern here. So it builds a couple of patterns, it uses the algorithms to learn, and it can give you a probability of guessing if the person has diabetes or not, right? Now, we did all of these things in a very modular approach. You look at that, right? Now, let me remove all the outputs again. Let me clear the outputs and look at this, right? You see that we have how nicely we have each of these in a single tab. You imagine just having all of these in just one single tab and me trying to explain you guys, and at the end, I just have to hit one enter button and everything gets done. You really will not understand anything about what's going on. This way that I broke it down for you, of course, since this is not a data science demo, I just walked you through it really quickly. If this was a data science demo, we would talk about all of these things to a good amount of detail. But my point here was to make sure you can have this kind of a modular approach to go on to teach this, right? How cool is that? So ladies and gentlemen, this is Jupyter Notebook. So with this practical session, let's get back to discuss a little bit of theory and we can go on to close this particular session, right? So welcome back to the presentation. The last thing that we're going to discuss is the benefits of you guys using Jupyter Notebooks. You already know all the benefits by this moment of time, I am for sure, but let's quickly revisit it so you guys remember it, right? First of all, modular division of code, right? You saw how we can divide code into tiny bite-sized pieces, and imagine having that entire code snippet in one cell, and it wouldn't even be called a cell at that point of time, right? So modular division helps you immensely. This is a benefit you know about. Here's another benefit that you guys already know about at this moment of time, right? Jupyter Notebook is platform independent, as in you can work with it on Windows, Mac, and Linux as well. And of course, it's language independent, as in it'll work with multiple different programming languages like Python, R, Scala, and about another 35 or 36 programming languages. The next benefit, of course, it makes your entire process of writing code, and if you have to explain it to either a teammate or in fact enthusiastic learners like you guys, it makes my job a lot easier to see it in these tiny cells where I can just execute that cell and show you what it means, right? Now, it will not always work like with other programming languages. If you have a compiler based programming languages, you usually cannot divide it into cells. You can actually, there are many ways to do it, but natively you cannot do it. With Python we can do it because Python is an interpreted programming language. If you do not know what that means, that's up for another discussion. But then since we're at the end of this video, you guys can actually find out everything about the interpreted language nature of Python as well if you guys are interested, right? Fantastic, guys. On that note, let's quickly summarize everything that we have learned. We started out by taking an understanding of what a notebook is. Once we understood a notebook, we dived right into the heart of the topic. We understood what the Jupyter Notebook is, how it works, why is it so popular, who uses Jupyter Notebooks, the applications. We ran through the interface. You guys saw the Jupyter dashboard. We also worked with taking a look at the entire user interface of the Jupyter Notebook itself. We had a simple demo for all the people who may or may not know how to work with Python as well. So I hope all of you all weren't confused at that moment that we had two small demos. That's the reason, right? I just wanted all of you all to understand. Now for the audience who are slightly more advanced, who have worked with Python previously, you guys got to saw the entire huge demo, right? Both beginners and intermediate viewers, I am sure you guys will understand that, hey, having this modular division helps us a lot, right? So we checked out all of those practically and we walked through the benefits, but then by the time I came to explain the benefits for you guys, right, you guys already knew it. As soon as you saw the slide, I'm sure you were like, yes, we know this, right? That is the entire point of this particular tutorial, ladies and gentlemen, to make sure that all of you all at this moment of time know what a Jupyter Notebook is, know how to install it, know everything there is in the user interface, and you know how to work with it, and you are ready to either learn Python or use any other programming language supported by Jupyter Notebook to actually have a problem, find a problem, solve it, and do it in a fantastic way using Jupyter Notebooks, right? On that note, guys, you've completed this particular tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Anirudh Rao, and as always, I'm excited to see you guys on the next one.
I want to introduce you to Great Learning Academy. This is a free initiative by Great Learning where you can have access to over 200 plus courses with 1000 plus hours of free content on all of the trending high demand domains absolutely free. Register now to complete the course and get your free certificate of completion as well. Check out the link in the description box of the video below for more details. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, I want to request you to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. This is done to make sure you do not miss out on any of the new updates or video releases from Great Learning. And of course, guys, if you enjoy this video, show us some love and do like this video. Knowledge increases by sharing, right? So make sure you share this video with your friends, colleague, and everyone who can make use of it. And at the end of it, make sure to comment on the video if you have any queries or any suggestions, and I'll be more than happy to respond to all of your comments.